Today's episode is brought to you by In My Bag Apparel and Customs. In My Bag is a brand that collaborates with talented artists from across the country to bring some unique and exclusive concepts to life at a reasonable price. For $15 off your first purchase, visit whatnot.com/invite/inmy_bag 2023. That's whatnot.com/invite/inmy_bag 2023 for $15 off your first purchase. And make sure to check them out on Instagram as well at inmy_bag 2023. Did you know 1 in every 18 people has a third nipple? I don't believe that at all. Let's get into it. All right. What's good, everybody? Welcome back to the Playbook Podcast. I'm Prescott Kelly. Today is Tuesday, February 25th. Glad to have you back with us. The shout to give, the very beginning of the show, Evan Bradfield, In My Bag, Customs and Apparel. This shirt right here is courtesy of them. We got the Mama Combat clothing line. Sent me the LeBron James one. I was scrolling through my TikToks the other day, and he was promoting this particular shirt. And I was like, yo, that's pretty dope, man. He goes, I got you, man. Got the hookup, came into Alaska just the way I hoped that it would. But on today's episode, because it's been a week or so removed from us being on here, C.R. McGee had asked in a different chat, are older women taking advantage of these NBA players? Also, does it make sense for the Rams to want to trade Matt Stafford or for him to want to be traded? What makes more sense, that or $50 million for him? Bills re-up Khalil Shakir, and I can't believe that people are still talking about wanting to ban the brotherly shove. Add your questions, comments into the chat as well. Audio version will be wherever you get your podcast later on tonight/tomorrow morning. So, again, to start the show, this was something that was brought up in a different page that I'm on, and regular friend of the show and guest host, if you will, C.R. McGee, had asked, are these young bucks, these young NBA players getting taken advantage of, and basically like they're victims to these cougars and don't know it yet? And what are our thoughts on it? And I feel like this is a delicate one that you have to kind of dance around, right? Because the word victim, we see too often. There are some people who try to take advantage of people and play the victim, even though they're the ones taking advantage of other people. On top of the fact that there are some real victims of people taking advantage of them. It's usually the roles are reversed, though. It's usually men taking advantage of women, not usually women taking advantage of men. Also, when you couple that with how are you going to play the victim when you're a young, attractive, good-looking, millionaire 20-something-year-old, and you've got women who are 1.5 times your age, older than that even, coming after you because maybe they're after your clout, maybe they're after your bag, maybe they want the name recognition. There's a lot of moving parts to it, but I think that we can we want to dehumanize if you're famous a lot. I feel like that's one of the big issue for me when that question was asked, is that we're just dehumanizing people who have money. And so like these young NBA players, right? You can be off-put by, if the question is being asked, do you think that professional athletes are being taken advantage of by older women? We have seen it, and this is called the Playbook Podcast for a reason. This has been a playbook for too many people, is to get in bed with somebody who's got the money. And didn't 50 say it? Have a baby by me, baby, be a millionaire. I don't know if that's the way that you should go around promoting things, but there's a lot of things. Ego goes into this. I just feel like we got to be careful. So I understand where there can be some pushback on the calling these young bucks victims, but when you're in the barbershop and someone tells you to slow down, dog, maybe take a step back because there's so many temptations. You got the money, you think the money's going to be there forever. You're not thinking right. And again, like it's a delicate line to walk because when you talk about people taking advantage of other folks when it comes to physicality, sounds like it's the wrong word, but when you start getting into intimate relationships, it's a really fine line to cross. I get why some people are really on the side of how you gonna play the victim. I think it's just slow it down for a minute, man. Like I understand why folks want to give the pushback on you can't use that verb because the term itself, I agree. Victim might be the wrong word, but there's still somebody trying to take advantage of you, your status, your money, most likely. And I think that's the biggest thing that we gotta take from this is that just because you're young, rich, and successful doesn't mean that you can't be taken advantage of. Because we've even seen this, even if we're going to cross-pollinate it for a moment with guys like Adrian Peterson, or just people who have gotten all their money robbed because like people took advantage of them not having their own finances involved. They're two separate things, right? Because we're talking about body versus just monetary value, or not even value, but just monetary what you bring to the table versus somebody going for just physically what you look like. But it is something that just because you have money doesn't mean you're always going to have it, though. Just because you look good doesn't mean you're always going to have your looks. So when the question was originally brought up, I thought it's an interesting talking point. I think that there's enough evidence out there where there are some women who are just after these dudes for the bag, the money, the anchor baby, whatever you might think, man. I'm just saying there's enough representation of it to say, yo, these young bucks, we have a rookie symposium for your finances, right? I don't know if they do this with the fame and what comes with that, with the old trying to hawk on these young dudes. I'm sure that they have. I'm sure that they will. And if they haven't, I'm sure they should. But again, this whole show is predicated upon looking at things through multi-layered lenses from everybody's aspect, right? If you don't like the V word victim being put on those dudes, that's fine. I get it. But when you are trying to take advantage of somebody because they have something that you want and you take advantage of them, victim is usually where we come down to on that. Evan Bradfield's in the building. I said it from the get-go. The shirt I'm rocking right now is from the In My Bag Apparel line. It's slick. I like it. I like it a lot, dude. And if Evan, if you're still watching, if you want to drop the link in there, you can go to Whatnot. Just download the Whatnot app and then look up In My Bag. In My Bag Apparel. Like I said, it's the intro to every show now. But yeah, man, it's a dope shirt. It fits real good. The large, I wasn't sure because I recently bought a pair of Jordans off my buddy that lives up here, and he has a clothing line. So when I bought those from him, he gave me a hoodie to rock, and it was an extra large, and it was still a little big, but this fits nice. It fits nice. It feels good. It's comfy. It fits in all the right places, even though I'm a little too chunky for it. But that ain't on you, dog. That's a me problem. But no, I love the shirt. It looks good. Remember, In My Bag, custom apparel. And it's not just LeBron. So if you're not a LeBron James dude, I get it. But this is the one that he was rocking in the video on TikTok. So I said, hey, man, whatever you're rocking right now, just go ahead and holler at your boy, and we can go ahead and get it going. I know there's some Steph Curry fans that are out there, all that good stuff. So, yeah, for sure. Just check out the link. Yeah, so anybody who comes in later on, the invite, or not the invite, but the link for whatnot.com is down below for In My Bag. Y'all got to check it out. It's good stuff. It fits comfy. This is a large on me, and I'm 6'3", 220. So if you're watching either live through Facebook Live or the YouTube channel, you know, it is what it is. I saw the Steph one, man. The Steph one was hot. I didn't see the Caitlin Clark one. Oh, it's coming soon. The Caitlin Clark one's coming soon, which is going to be dope, I would imagine. But yeah, no, it's a great fit, great quality. So anybody who watches or listens later on, we're going to put in the show notes later on too. I need to be better about that because I'm really bad at just doing show notes and stuff. It's all once I do the lives, I'm bad about all the prep work, but you guys don't want to hear about that. Let's move on to Matt Stafford. So there's been some rumors, some whispers and murmurs recently that Matt Stafford could be on the trade block or commanding a $50 million a year salary. And which one makes sense? Because when this initially dropped, the only team that was associated with it initially was the New York Giants, which I thought was ridiculous because it's the New York Giants. They're so far away. And like, I understand wanting to maximize your return as a pro franchise, right? Like there's certain things like that's your job. But I also feel that there's a level of back and forth that for you to still acquire new free agents, want people to play for you, that there's a certain level of decorum that you have to have with certain guys. And with Matt Stafford, being the professional that he is, doing what he did in Detroit, getting to your spot, winning you a ring his first go around. And I know that he wasn't the only player that was there with your Aaron Donalds and your, Cooper Kupp had his monster year and Jalen Ramsey. Like I get all those things, right? But you made an unprecedented trade to get rid of Jared Goff, who had already taken to a Super Bowl as well, then got Stafford and then went to it and won. These last 2 years were supposed to be rebuild years, and you were one of two. Y'all beat the Eagles in the regular season and damn near beat them to go to the NFC Championship game. This was supposed to be a rebuild year, and he still keeps you there. Looking at it from everybody's angle, though, does it make sense for the Rams to trade Matt Stafford? Yes. If you're able to get a replacement for him, which again, I still don't even know. Are you going to get somebody who's better than Matt Stafford right now? The answer to that riddle is probably no, or at least not being able to find a trade partner who has a quarterback of his stature to make it make sense. But the Giants don't make any sense at all. They're so far away. And if they're really reaching to get Matt Stafford, all the other pulls that they're going to have to do and all the strings that they pull to make this roster relevant is crazy. Like there's no way that makes any sense. I had put out into the universe, well, what if they trade him to Miami? Like, would Miami be willing to trade Tua for Stafford? And it was kind of split down the middle. Most people said no, you don't trade Stafford for Tua. But as that thing kind of marinated, a few people jumped on board and said, yeah, I mean, and this was my thought process, is that Tua's been banged up so many times that you don't know when his last play is going to be. I know that he tells us in front of the media all the time, I want to play football. This is what I'm supposed to do. I was made for this. I'm not going to just give up just because you guys tell me to. That's all fine and good, but after your non-injury season 2 years ago, because apparently you learned how to slide and you took jiu-jitsu, which apparently helps. That was 2 years ago. This last year, you still got banged up again. Like your NFL career is not guaranteed to you, bro. So, and especially with an older Tyreek as well, this is where you got to really maximize what you still have there. Because if you don't, all the money, everything you just did is for nothing then. The trade for Tua, I'm sorry, the trade for Tyreek, paying Tua the money, like if you don't do something right now, it's going to be for naught. So if they were going to, I think Miami makes sense, and Indy, I think the Colts make some sense, mostly because that division's trash, right? Now, I'm not as high on Houston as a lot of people are. I'm not as high on CJ Stroud as a lot of people were. Now, maybe year 3, he gets back into what we thought he was during his rookie season, but folks were willing to anoint him the new king of like the AFC basically after his rookie year. But the expectations were so low, and expectations, when those things change, like when the floor is so low and you change the expectations, especially in season, I mean, sometimes you get blinded by what's actually in front of you. And he wasn't stellar his rookie year. They just won games. He was even worse his rookie or his second year. But again, that division's been so bad for so long that the Colts to me make some sense. But I feel like that's probably the furthest you get down the line of, are you willing to trade for Matt Stafford? But in a perfect world, the way that I would do it is if I'm the Rams, I'd pay him the $50 million. I don't know if I wouldn't do anything long term, but I would absolutely, if I can't get what I need back, and by need, it's, if you think that you're going to get a first round draft, because that was the thing with the Giants that made no sense to me, is that you're not moving the third overall pick to get Matt Stafford. And if you do, you have to actually legitimately be the New Jersey Giants. You're not allowed to be New York. You can't claim it. That's Buffalo territory. We're the only ones who actually live up here and do this thing in New York. Anyways, you got to, everything has to be associated with Jersey now, even your team name. But if the return is not the number 3 overall pick, what are you going to do for Matt Stafford? Are you going to do a second rounder? Again, the Giants don't make any sense. So trading Matt Stafford to anybody, I think you don't have to send him to exactly where he wants to go. But this also comes back to the point of, like, you have to do well by the people who have gotten you to certain places, because you don't want to be turned off from free agents going forward. So yeah, it would be like if Matt Stafford said, well, I want to go play for the Eagles, and I'm not going to play it down for you unless I go play for the Eagles. I know they got Jalen Hurts. That's not the point, though. It's just in this scenario, he goes, well, if I don't play for the Eagles, I'm not playing anywhere. You don't have to bend the knee and do that, but you need to send him to a place where he can be utilized. He's not in a trash situation, and that you can still get something back for him, because you don't want to completely piss off these free agents that are going to come down the pipeline to play for you at some point in time. They want to understand that you understand that it's a business, because it is. This is a business, and players understand it. Coaches, GMs, owners, they all understand it. And if you always treat the labor poorly, there are certain markets that folks just don't want to go and play at. And every sport has them. Every sport has the poorly run organizations, has the poorly run teams, and the free agent market is, unless you overpay, which again, that's what dumb teams do, is they overpay for old quarterbacks or just old talent. And that's why I think it makes sense to trade Stafford if you get the right amount back into the right team, so you don't hurt yourself in the long run as well. But I have no problem paying him like a 2-year, $50 million deal, because he's still one of the best quarterbacks, especially in that conference. And you're going to need that to be able to knock off Detroit and Philly. I'm also not super high on Washington. I know they made it to the NFC Championship game this year with Jaden Daniels as a rookie, but what I need people to understand is, like, every year we do this, where if you over exceed the expectation, the floor is, well, you can only get better. But if that's the strict ideology of this, then why do we do it? Because every year the Bills would have already won a Super Bowl, right? Because they went to a division round, and they went to a championship. Then they went back, but they went backwards, and they still haven't gotten to a Super Bowl with Josh Allen. Like, same thing with the Bengals from a few years ago. Well, they went to the Super Bowl. They can only win one next year, right? No, like, none of this. That's not how any of this works. So with Washington, I'm still not sold that they'll be able to get back or get further than they did last year. But to kind of put a bow on this Matt Stafford thing is, I think everything makes sense if these teams are able to make it make sense. Trading him is not the worst thing in the world because he is almost 40 years old. It makes sense if you send him to the right place, get the right amount of compensation back for him, where he can still win. You don't look like a piss poor organization, and they can pay him. Or you can be the savior, but not overcommit. Pay him his 50 mil, but don't do it for 4 and 5 years, because one of the things that irritates me more than anything else is when these organizations pay for past successes and they extend teams too long. That's always been my criticism of the Falcons with Matt Ryan, the Steelers with Roethlisberger, just not being able to cut bait early enough when you should, because then it sets you back, another 4 or 5 years. So trading him makes sense. Signing him makes sense. but everything has to make sense. Get the right amount back for him, or don't overextend and pay him $50 million for 4 years, but do it for 2. He's proven that he's better and more consistent and is willing to play through durability or the durability issues. That's why I brought up the Dolphins earlier, is that Tua can't stay on the field all the time. Your offensive window is like right now, and it's really been the last 2 years, but with Tyreek getting old, that's why I threw the Dolphins trade rumor. It wasn't even rumors. I was just thinking out loud and threw it out into the universe. That will make sense to me. It's still warm weather, but you still got Josh Allen, but I don't trust the Jets or the Patriots right now to be really like legitimately any good. Long and short of it is, pay that man $50 million for 2 years or trade him, but don't do him dirty. Don't do him dirty. Anyway, moving on. So the Bills went ahead and signed up Khalil Shakir for 4 years, $60 million, which I think is the perfect deal. And I don't want to do a whole lot of Bills talk. This is not a Bills podcast. But when I got some, not necessarily pushback for when I put this out there, but I think that the signing makes just too much sense. Because Khalil Shakir last year, and I had to pull these up real quick, 76 catches, 800 yards, 4 tuds. I think we kind of knew the touchdowns are going to be down just because they spread the ball. Josh Allen's still going to do Josh Allen thing. But when you look at the landscape of what these wide receivers are making now, basically averaging $15 million a year is perfect because he's not worth 35 like Justin Jefferson. But are his stats basically half of what he got? I mean, essentially, 100. If you were to multiply by 2 what Shakir did last year, that would be 152 catches, 1,642 yards, and 8 tuds. Would that be worth $30 million a year to you? Because by the numbers that we got with the Justin Jeffersons and the Jamar Chases of the world, that would make sense. But you're getting him at half the value because I believe that Khalil Shakir is half the wide receiver, not by just his measurements, but he is somebody who the Bills rely on for that offense to keep clicking and for it to keep moving. He is not a $35-40 million a year wide receiver. And if they thought that he was, I'd have to jump ship from my Bills fanhood real quick. Because the one thing I have really kind of laid my hat on with this team is like just trying to keep my fanhood still alive and kicking is that the front office has done a remarkable job as far as like restructuring contracts, finding these diamonds in the rough, whether it be free agency or via trade. They've been able to do things to make me believe that they know what they're doing. So $15 million a year essentially for Khalil Shakir, I think is perfect. He is not somebody who is going to be the game breaker, who is going to get you that 10 reception, 220 yard, 3 tutty game. It's just not going to happen. But they use him in motion. They use him in the backfield. They run him in screens. Like he's the chain mover, like he's vital to the offense. But they're also not going to pay him like he's top flight wide receiver money because he's not a top flight wide receiver. So everything about, I almost put in perspective of like, so I've used this analogy once beforehand for those who, I know that most people who are familiar with the show, The League, the fantasy football show that was on FX, was, I think it was episode 1 of season 2. They go to Vegas for the draft. Chad Ochocinco's in this episode, and they go to a strip club. And there's this girl named Ambrosia, and she's trying to give like draft advice. I'm like, what do you know about rivers and drafts? And she basically puts on the table some information. She go back to the champagne room essentially, and we'll give you some more information. But for free, like, why would you go ahead and take Felix Jones in the 5th when you can get Ricky Williams in the 8th? Their stats are going to be the same. It's kind of the same thing with Khalil Shakir. Like, I don't want to dumb this thing down strictly to a statistical value of what that means, because stats, I think, can be empty calories, and they can also be empty numbers that we're just throwing out into a universe because it looks good on paper. But what his impact for what the Bills do could. I saw some. I can't remember who it was. They said that he got swindled because I think it was Kyle Kramer. I don't want to be that guy and misquote who said it, but someone said that he got swindled. $15 million a year for a guy who's going to give you less than 1,000 yards because this is his third year in the league, right? He's barely cracked over 1,300 yards, I think, total. So the reason why I also think it's perfect is it's a 4-year extension, 60 million. So he's young enough because he's going into year 4. If he outperforms this contract, he's going to earn another one. So like within 2 years, he'll probably get another extension if he outperforms it. And if he does, great. I hope that Buffalo doesn't sign him to that extension because he's going to be pushing 30 at that point in time. But it gives him the opportunity to get another bag, get a bigger bag, because there's always going to be somebody. And the thing is, too, if Buffalo does end up winning a Super Bowl, the amount of GMs who still treat this like it's Madden is crazy to me. Where, like, when you in the early years, or not like early, but early 2000s, mid 2000s, where if you made deep playoff runs, your guys would get crazy amounts of experience and they'd go from a 72 to an 89 in one season because all you had was the hardware on you. It's amazing that so many GMs and owners still do that based on just having the hardware. So if Buffalo does win one and Shakir plays his contract, he's certainly going to get in their bag. And with the cap continuously going up, it's going to make more sense down the line. But I mean, I personally just think that I think it's a good overall deal. Very rarely does it seem like we get these extensions that make sense for both sides. You're a player who's never reached over 1,000 yards. And I don't want to dumb this down to just statistics, but if you've been in the league for 3 years and you've never had a 1,000-yard receiving season, ever, you barely have over 1,300 in 3 seasons. Especially if you play with Josh Allen, you're going to start $15 million a year for a number 2 slot receiver. But you're the dude. You're still the guy. You're the chain mover. No, I think it makes perfect sense for both sides. And if he outplays his contract, like I said, I feel like he can get a bigger extension. So I hope it's someplace else. But a guy at his stature and what he plays and what he does, I don't see how he could ever get to that $30 million a year cap, if you will, that ceiling. If he doesn't just go, he has to just be absolutely bonkers the next 2 years to get that kind of top tier money, which I just don't see him being. Let me go over to the chat real quick. Evan says, kind of off topic, sorry, but do you know who the new OC is in Philly? Matt Brooks and I didn't know if they named one. Actually, off the top of my head, I don't. I know Kellen Moore dipped out. He's the new Saints head coach, if I remember right. But no, unfortunately, I don't know who their new OC is. And I actually don't have a problem with teams not hiring people directly out of seasons. Like, I feel like if you do that, like with New Orleans, when they I just kind of talked about this with players and teams getting on the bandwagon too early, is you're just going off of, oh, you just won the Super Bowl? That means that we have to have you. And we've seen this a lot where you're getting like a disciple of a head coach that you love. And the Belichick tree is one of those ones that has historically failed across the board. But in Saban to a degree too, like you think that you're getting a reincarnation of that coach whenever you hire the name that's associated with that guy, and then they end up failing. So New Orleans may have just done the exact same thing when it comes to Kellen Moore, that, well, you just won the Super Bowl in Philly, and they got a better offensive line than us, better skill position guys, better running back, better quarterback. You should come here when we're in cap hell. That's what you should do. You should come here right now. I have no problem with these players and with these coaches want to get a bag because, dude, it is not nothing's promised to you tomorrow. Please do. Go on ahead. But based on where the Saints are now and them just immediately hiring Kellen Moore, like 50 hours after they won the Super Bowl, screams desperation. And the thing is, like, you owe him everything. I don't know what his contract is, but you owe him every single dollar. Like, you don't get away out of it unless he John Gruden somebody, sends out some email that he's not supposed to, and they try to get some of that money back. But just fire if the Saints are terrible next year, which I believe they probably will be, if they fire him again, they still owe him everything. So to me, I've always said this: desperate people do desperate things in desperate situations. And yes, even millionaires, like these owners and coaches, they do desperate things because they want to save their own skin. And not that that's going to happen with the Saints necessarily, but my bigger point is that the Saints jumped on him right away because they had that Super Bowl buzz and go, do you want a Super Bowl? We want that name. We want that guy here now. Put him in his key card works immediately. And I just feel like it's a short-sighted impulse buy. And usually when you do that, it ends up not working out well for you. We're going to take a 30-second break real quick. And sorry, I was trying to find my thingy. Oh. So we're going to read off a little 30-second ad. I'm parched. Be right back. Now, with this being primarily a sports podcast, we understand that hydration and energy are both very important, not just for pro athletes, but for pro podcasters like your boy over here. That is why DUBBY.GG, that's right, Dubby, has linked up with Chop It Up a Piscot to give you a 10% off your online order using promo code Piscot. They've got swag bags and shakers, energy drinks and hydration supplements, and everything in between. My wife loves the pine berry splash flavor. I'm more of a watermelonada guy, but you really can't go wrong with either. They're rich in vitamins B6, 7, 12, vitamin C, and other vitamins and minerals to make you be the best version of yourself. Once again, visit www.dubby.gg. Use promo code PSCOT for 10% off your purchase. Y'all know the drill. Stay up, stay blessed. Let's get back into the episode. So I think what I just realized, I have to change that. The promo code is still the same. It's still with me for Dubby. I just realized that it says Chop On with P. Scott when it should say the Playbook Podcast. I haven't updated my soundboard yet. Anyway, let's get back to the chat real quick before we go into the brotherly shove. And if you guys have things you want to talk about, please throw them in the chat. I got about 20, 30 minutes left until I got to hang it up for the day. But Evan says, how many coordinators has Philly had in the last 4 years? And it just feels like they've done it. It's not even, well, it's every year that Jalen Hurts has been there on top of what he's done in college too. So they've had a new offensive coordinator every single year from what I understand. And that's the thing is that when you have that kind of talent, it doesn't mask every deficiency that you have, but it certainly helps. And I mean, to put it in perfect context is that everybody, myself included, and I think that a lot of people still do, is that they don't even know if Nick Sirianni is a good coach. I think that is a fair, if you have that question still in your mind, I feel like that's a fair question for you to have internally or have with your friends. Because all the late game adjustments, all the things he does in the media, all the things that he says, his press conferences, like how he handles things makes you feel like, does he really, really know what he's doing? But when you have Kellen Moore, who's a great offensive coordinator, and Vic Fangio, who's one of the best defensive minds that we've seen ever, and you put it with the talent they have, because the talent didn't really, the rookies were awesome on the defensive side of the ball this year. I'm not trying to take anything away from that. But 2 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, everybody had all pro years. And then they started off like 10-0, 11-1 or something goofy, and then fell off. They just completely fell off a cliff. Then you get Kellen Moore, and then you get Vic Fangio, and you fix Cooper DeJean obviously helps. But I mean, you were able to rekindle what you had, and then made it better. So the offensive coordinators, yes, they've had multiple every single year since Jalen's been their quarterback, but it does feel like if you want to still question Nick Sirianni as a head coach, I would understand it. We've done it with Mike McCarthy too. Like that's the thing is we've had these conversations about Mike McCarthy and how Aaron Rodgers, that's been my viewpoint, is that when it came to Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers kept Mike McCarthy employed way longer than he should have. And that is kind of what it feels like. Not directly, but adjacent enough where we can start to say that Nick Sirianni is employed basically because Howie Roseman just like he's so much better at his job that dude, you really got to try to kind of f it up. And you could almost kind of say it's almost the same thing with the Cowboys back in the early 90s when Jimmy Johnson was really the guy kind of pulling the strings. And then when he decided to leave, Barry Switzer rolled into town, they won a Super Bowl. It's like you had to really f it up to not win with that team. And it kind of feels the same with Sirianni. So I want to still give him, you know, his respect as a head coach. But if you, because they've been to 2 in the last 3 years. They made the playoffs every year that he's been a head coach. But I understand your trepidations if you still have them, because I know that I certainly still do. Says I like the hat with the shirt. Colors go well. I appreciate that, man. Yeah, I went and got some new gear. I want to be more light blue because of the, you know, imaging that we got going on. And this isn't perfect. I'm gonna have to toy around with this. But yeah, man, like the shirt, hat, everything was just, I was feeling it. I thought it was gonna look good. Looks dope. Feels good. Again, if you're watching live, scroll up in the comments for the whatnot.com invite. Or if you want shirts like this that look like this, look up your boy Evan Bradfield because it's a nice shirt. I like what they got going on. Let's get back to the chat real quick, and then we'll get to the last talking point list. Something really dives in here. I get that you have to take those opportunities because they aren't promised, but if Super Bowl is the goal, who's got a better chance with Kellen Moore next year, Eagles or Saints? Oh, I mean, if Kellen, with the Eagles, obviously, I feel like I feel like sometimes we can overblow the team chemistry thing, because if that were the case, you know, teams that have little roster turnover would be better year by year, but that's not always the case. But if Super Bowl is a goal, who's got a better chance with Kellen next year, Eagles or Saints? I think that now I may be misreading the question. Are you asking if the Eagles had Kellen Moore as their head coach and fired Sirianni, or are you asking if he still stays as their coordinator and he just never goes to New Orleans? I just want to make sure that I'm addressing that question properly. Because the thing is, like, the Super Bowl wins you so much equity. Like Tom Coughlin coached for way longer than he probably should have. But when you've got 2 rings and they're both against Brady and one was an undefeated season, like that earns you so much equity, even though they missed the playoffs almost every other single year under him and Eli. But again, in that market, and which I think is a dumb argument, but I understand what it is. That just feels disingenuous at sometimes. No, just in the position he was in. Oh, so okay, so Sorry, I'm just reading back to the chat. I think it's something he at least has to think about. There's another ring within reach, if not more, if he stays. Yeah, I mean, if Kellen stays in Philadelphia, the likeliness of them, I would, and obviously, like you can't really tell because he's not there anymore, and you can't have him in 2 different places at once. But I would say that the likeliness of the Eagles and repeat Super Bowl champs is already hard enough. But I would say that the odds would be higher that the Eagles repeated if Kellen Moore was still their head coach than even the Saints winning 5 games this year. I don't think Kellen Moore is going to have that big of an impact with a Saints team that The only saving grace is that the division is cheeks. That's really the only saving grace where the Saints might be able to get to 5 W's. Because, I mean, Olave, I like Olave. I really do. But it's just, they've got so much cap. They have so many cap issues that you have to readdress. And the Taysom Hill one, this was always funny to me, was the people that were defending Taysom Hill. And it's like, why? He's getting, to put it in perspective, the Saints were paying Taysom Hill more than the Bills just signed Khalil Shakir for. Like, let's put that in perspective real quick. A guy who was a backup quarterback, a backup tight end, a backup wide receiver, a backup running back. He's the dude who people who look like me love to defend Taysom Hill, man. He's a football player. He is. He's also not good at it. He's not great at anything. If you need 3 yards, he'll get you 2.5 to 3.5. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I might just be hating on him, but the money that he was making for being so much of a specialized piece was awkward to me. Like, if you're not your third best wide receiver, you're not the third best tight end, you're not the third best quarterback, you're not the third best running back, why the hell are you making almost $20 million a year? That just seemed like it was not to me. Swiss Army knife. He's a football player. Yep. And I've always said this about him and Tim Tebow. I want you in my locker room. I don't want you starting for me. Like, if you were my starters at any position, I'm cooked. But good locker room guy, good for morale, right? Like, I have no problem with you being on my team. It's not what I don't want you to be associated with my franchise at all. But you sure as hell not be number 1 or 2 on my depth chart of anything. That you are the epitome of last man or next man up and other duties as assigned. Good sir. Like, that's where I'm coming from on it. Anyway, moving on to what's probably going to be the last talking point of the day. Got to go back through my Oh, yeah. Yo, the Packers are weak. I don't know exactly the entire story behind this, but the fact that it came back through my social mentions again today is that they want to ban the tush push. Can we stop this already? It's not going to. It's not going anywhere. It is a legal play that the Eagles just happen to do better than everybody else. The only way, and I've said this on a couple of different podcasts that I was a guest on as well, is that there's zero chance that this thing ever gets banned. Unless half the teams can do it at the success rate that the Eagles are doing it at. That's the only way. And even still, that's going to be a very knee-jerk reaction to something that doesn't even need to be addressed, really. Because the QB sneak's been around forever. The fullback dive has been around forever. You can still do all of those things and nobody cares. But the Bills prove this, man. They were 1 for 5. Well, they had to tell they'd only go left. Well, then be better. Don't run it to the left every damn time. Weird. You know, this is a play that unless it gets to a point where half the league is successful at it at the same rate that the Eagles are, that is when things will change, because this is it. It's still an entertainment product, right? Like, this isn't something that it doesn't move the needle. I mean, if you're a Philly fan, of course you love it. That's ours. The tush push and the brotherly shove, like, that's our thing, dog. Like, you can't take that from us. But there are so many other plays that are similar to it, and y'all just aren't good at it anymore. But I did an episode, this would have been 3 years ago, where I was praising Bill Belichick because I said, look, he's winning ugly with Cam Newton at quarterback. The worst offensive roster I've ever seen in my entire life, and a broken, older Cam Newton. And they still won 9 games. Why? You got to come to our place too. We're going to win ugly. Winning ugly matters late, and it matters in general. You're not going to have your best stuff all the time. And he zigged when others were zagging. Everyone wanted to go fast and light, and he went heavy. Offensive line, heavy. Running backs, heavy. I'm going to beat the hell out of you and win ugly. And went above 500 with the worst offense I've ever seen, at least in the last 8 to 9 years. That Patriots team 3 years ago was awful. But he zigged when others zagged, and I thought, hey, he's back onto something. The running backs are going to start mattering. And I said that 3 years ago, and they still don't matter. If LaShawn's watching, trust me, dog, I know they still don't matter because the Bills are they're going to be in this back and forth war with James Cook that he wants $15 million a year, and I wouldn't do that either. But we're putting too much emphasis on a play that only one team can do. Sorry that they had the cheat code for it, but the reason why I say it'd be a knee-jerk reaction is this isn't going to be a thing that will be sustainable for years and years and years and years either. You're not going to have the same offensive line all the time. You're not going to have that same quarterback all the time. You're not going to have Saquon all the time. You're not going to have Dallas. Like, your roster is going to change over. Whether they can do the tush push, the brotherly shove, or not, whether they're willing to or not, whether they can execute or not, it's always going to change. So this is something where I feel like it would be a knee-jerk reaction if they actually changed it, but I don't think that they will. Again, if this was ruining the product every single week, and half the teams were doing it and doing it well, and just running for 3 yards in a cloud of dust every down, yeah, they would ban it, or they'd say, hey, until you get inside the 10 or 5 yard line, you can't do this. But until that happens, like it's all irrelevant. Like I never want to say that anything is impossible, right? Because rule changes happen every single year. Player safety happens every year. The rules change because of player safety. But there's nothing to suggest that people are getting more hurt or that it's the ultimate cheat code. It's just, it works in short yardage situations, but you're not the only team who can do it. Just do it better. It's just I feel like it's a complaining piece because the Eagles are the ones who won this year, right? Like we had this couple years ago with the Bills and Chiefs, and the Bills lose because they didn't get to touch the ball, and the Chiefs beat the Bills, and next thing we know, the next year they changed the overtime rules in the playoffs. It's, y'all just if we just complain all the time, you're always going to get something that addresses what you are irritated about. But the whole is still not going to be great. Right? The product is still going to have its flaws because it doesn't pertain to you because your favorite team still lost. Womp womp, too bad, so sad. We don't live in a world where just because, I don't know, man. It got me. This has actually got me more worked up than anything else, is because I did an episode 3 years ago where it's like, I don't hate sports, I hate sports fans. The fact that like y'all don't see your own hypocrisy in, if it was your team, like if you were the Packers and you execute this play flawlessly all the time, y'all wouldn't be complaining. But you are, because it's somebody else, especially in conference, and you think you have the Young Bucks squad that can challenge for something. If it's not yours, you want to complain about it. And I just feel like it's weak sauce. Get better or stop it. With that being said, we're going to go ahead and hang it up for the day. You guys know the drill. You can find the audio podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. We'll put the links later on the Chop and Peace. I always say Chop and Peacock page, man. Still feels brand new. The Playbook podcast page, we're going ahead and put the audio versions of it. You can follow us on YouTube as well. Remember, the In My Bag apparel link is in there as well. You guys know the drill. Stay up, stay blessed. Catch you guys on the next one.